Imagine if you went to therapy and your counselor turned out to be a polyamorous transgender furry with multiple personalities. No need to imagine, you're about to find out. The person you're seeing is an online content creator and mental health counselor who goes by the name of Poppy, and in the past few years, they've been involved in a mire of drama and allegations. But before being Poppy, they were Joshua, an aspiring mental health worker who, in the early 2000s, married Juliana, a girl a few years older, with her being in her mid-20s and Joshua being just 19 years old. Most importantly, perhaps, she was 3 months pregnant with someone else's child. But he loved her so much that he was more than willing to marry her and adopt the child as his own. This isn't something many men are willing to do, but before you think this is some kind of admirable act of self-sacrifice in the name of love, Joshua, that is, after he became Poppy, not only came to regret this, but actually claimed that they were somehow groomed into the role of husband and parent, despite already being 19 years old when the decision to marry Juliana was made.
When I met my kid's mom, I buried every bit of trans that was in me and basically decided to do the whole like heteronormativity thing for a long time because I was A, scared of transitioning, and B, was thinking this was the right thing to do. I was an idiot, but it did give my kid a parent.
Whether Poppy here is a reliable narrator or not, I'll let you decide. But what's suggested is that they were already trans at this point, and internalized transphobia is what got them into that position. That, or this is just how Poppy rationalized their underlying wish for the regular family life they once had. Unfortunately, this is something they didn't experience for long, since soon after the marriage took place and the child was born, Juliana tragically passed away in a horse riding accident, leaving Joshua to be a single parent to their 3-year-old daughter. There's truly no overstating the magnitude of losing your partner while you still have a very small child to take care of, and part of everything that happens from here on out is set in motion by this event. According to Poppy, their daughter is autistic. Though it's worth saying he deduced this was the case without a proper diagnosis from a doctor.
Yeah, so I was not always been the smartest cookie, and one of the things is I didn't have any idea how autism worked because I don't have it. I knew how ADHD worked, you know, I had that down, but autism was not something I understood, and my kid was pretty autistic, and none of the doctors, the people I took them to, not a single person ever mentioned a damn thing, probably because they're AFAB.
Though information is scant on the pre-2010 years, we can assume that it was roughly during this period that Joshua attended Wayne State University, studying to eventually become a mental health counselor. He'd left a career in restaurant management behind to focus on getting the degrees he would need to do this, but despite these healthy ambitions, there were signs not everything was okay. The first sign of the extremely sexually impulsive behavior that would eventually be their undoing was when, immediately after his wife died, he got with a random goth chick from a Renaissance fair because she was hot, and he needed someone in bed now that he wasn't married. I understand everyone deals with grief differently, not judging here, but they effectively put their child in danger. Poppy's daughter, whom I'll be referring to as Spawn, since that's their effectively put that he wasn't married. I understand everyone deals with grief differently, not judging here, but they effectively put their child in danger. Poppy's daughter, whom I'll be referring to as Spawn, since that's their online handle, eventually made a Tumblr post saying, "Poppy's first partner after my biological mom died was abusive, and I still have trauma from that." It's unsure what exactly was meant by this because abusive can mean a whole variety of things. Regardless, it's very possible this is in reference to the aforementioned random goth girl, meaning Joshua's pleasure-seeking activity exposed his daughter to a freak, potentially some kind of predator. Speaking of predators, Poppy has also claimed that not only were they a victim of CSA, but, and I quote, they reduplicated it and did it to someone else, this someone else being their younger cousin. It's important to say that this event allegedly took place when Poppy was a teenager and obviously not operating at their full rational capacity. However, it is inevitably something to keep in mind going forward, since believe me, it will become relevant. Another thing to remember is that Poppy has also admitted to being abusive to Spawn, which is confirmed by the latter in the same Tumblr post I just read from. While Spawn didn't specify what this consisted of, they suggested that it wasn't that bad, at least in this post. After this first partner, there were 3 more that Spawn could remember, presumably taking place anywhere between 2000 2004 and the mid-2010s, none of which are considered relevant. It's only in the mid to late 2010s that Poppy, at some point, still going by Joshua, meets Xena, their primary partner and the one who is most known for appearing in the streams, mostly staying quiet while doing activities like knitting or coloring. Go play Warhammer like a real autistic person. Due to her passive demeanor, it's easy to trick yourself into thinking Xena is somehow milder in nature than Poppy, but you'd be very wrong. Xena, like Poppy, has a checkered past, and while she probably would like for people to only focus on the one time she played the martyr and got heroically kicked out of a Boy Scout camp for admitting to being a lesbian, it's not the non-binary furry coming out of the closet that's interesting here, but the skeletons that are still in it. Not many specifics are known in regard to the people she allegedly victimized or the nature of her actions, but another Tumblr post, presumably from someone in the same LGBT community as her, said, "Do not trust Xena. She is an abusive misogynist who has assaulted women in LGBT safe spaces. She is an aggressive trans misogynist who intimidates trans women, refuses to allow discussion of her trans misogyny, and preys on trans women." Though I do have to emphasize that these are just allegations, so as always, take it with a grain of salt. To add another layer of Machiavellian behavior on top of these claims, many people, including Spawn, have said that the whole being a quiet little grandma thing on stream is fully in act, as behind the scenes, Xena is even more aggressive and domineering than Poppy. Now is as good of a time as any to get into the alphabet soup of illnesses these people have, beginning with Xena. There are a couple physical conditions like migraines and IBS. Remember, she's a furry and probably owns a fursuit. Imagine how bad it smells. These are often cited as reasons for her being unemployed, along with something called PMDD, which is short for premenstrual dysphoric disorder, meaning dysphoria associated with accentuated PMS symptoms. But it's not just not having a job that Xena uses these issues as an excuse for. Any and all bad behavior gets swept under the rug of her conditions. If she gets upset and takes her frustration out on people, no matter how aggressive and methodical she can get, it's all the fault of her PMDD. But there may be a little wrinkle to that explanation. Xena takes testosterone, and the thing about taking T is in some cases it can literally give you roid rage, especially if you're someone with naturally low levels, like she obviously would have. I'm not an endocrinologist, nor am I a specialist on PMDD, but while it is a real condition, it's not the root of her behavior issues, as many people would later point out. Seems odd that the testosterone doesn't even get considered in the discussion, but my point stands regardless. In Spawn's post, they describe Xena as not so bad when they first moved in, claiming that the only unusual thing about her was that she got sick very often due to their other housemates not being respectful about the substances they brought into the house. I'll have to do some text interpretation here because this could mean a lot of things. First off, it's entirely possible that housemates here may be referring to other partners of Poppy's due to their polyamorous lifestyle, but I'm not even sure that this was being practiced this early on in the timeline. As far as substances go, this may mean drug abuse was going on in the same household that a child lived in, which is worrisome to say the least. However, knowing Xena has intestinal issues and can't eat gluten, it may just be talking about foods that triggered her IBS. But as the 2010s approached their latter half, a lot of things changed. First off, after aiming to become a provider of gender-affirming healthcare, Poppy decided to get high off their own supply and transition as well, which is when the Poppy name popped up. At this point, Xena was still a neutral to positive presence in the household, sometimes even aiding Spawn with school and disability services. However, things changed drastically when 2020 rolled around, and all of them were confined inside their home. The aforementioned housemates were no longer present at this point, which is important since this meant it was just Poppy, Xena, and Spawn, who despite not being a minor anymore, was still obviously the person with the least authority in the household, being seen as and treated like a child. Absent other people who could potentially serve as checks and balances for dysfunctional and abusive behavior, Xena's true nature reared its ugly head. Spawn's Tumblr post reads, "Xena gradually became meaner and more controlling of me, despite numerous claims of them not wanting to be my parent. This is where those structured chore times and meal times start to come into play. Now that Poppy was working from home, Xena had to be in the living room a lot. Poppy always defended me when Xena had arguments, one-sided yelling matches with me, but as time went on, she started siding with Xena more and more. I didn't really notice at first because I still loved and defended my mom. It was my friends who pointed out that my mom was treating me poorly in May of 2022. The trouble started way before that though. I just didn't realize it was abuse and mistreatment." We'll get to the details of these chore and meal restrictions later when they're elaborated on by Spawn in a document made after they left the household. While it's still possible, let's stay chronological. While 2020 was named as the year things began to change, it went by mostly silent, a kind of calm before the storm. It was only in February 2021 that Poppy began having an online presence to speak of, and that's when things really kicked into hyperdrive.
Whoa.
What's that?
I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, Nina
The second video Poppy ever posted to their YouTube channel was about how all mental health counselors have to be left-wing for them to practice ethically. In and of itself, this is the kind of OG Tumblrina core content that gets you ridiculed online, but compared to their later actions, this is a fart in the wind. The third video detailed their personal history with BPD, a sign that Poppy was nearing final form. Like Cell from Dragon Ball Z, but with mental illnesses instead of Ki. Their interest in treating mental illnesses became, or maybe always was, secondary to developing them like a human petri dish. I will admit that I have no idea which of these are amateur self-diagnoses and which are things real psychiatrists and psychologists have diagnosed Poppy with, but I'll go over all of them nonetheless. First off, they claim to have borderline personality disorder, and though the nature of this condition isn't super well understood, to put it bluntly, Poppy is to BPD the same way Xena is to PMDD, a mental condition that serves as an umbrella for any kind of misbehavior. Poppy also claims to have OSDD, and I'll save you from hearing the technical rigmarole and simplify it as a milder form of having multiple personalities, referred to as being plural. The thing is, being plural isn't recognized as a real thing, at least not yet. As a matter of fact, it's closely associated with kids who watch too much TikTok and start thinking they're anime characters in real life and start giving themselves mental illnesses so that they have an identity to cling to. Before you consider the possibility that there is some credence to the claims of being plural, Poppy's headmates, because that's what they're referred to, are Penny, a tiger-shark hybrid described as a young girl, and Pepper, a tiger-spider hybrid that is canonically 12 to 14 years old. Does this sound creepy and insane to you? It probably should. Poppy's main identity also has an animal self, a hyena, specifically because female hyenas have what is called a pseudo-penis. I won't go too deep into explaining how that works because this video is already f***ed enough as is, but from the names with alliteration, the personas, and the bizarre age-related connotations, all of this is pretty disturbing, especially since Poppy has publicly admitted to having victimized a minor once, but we'll get to the practical implications of these alters later. The content being released was par for the course. One claimed that not dating trans people if you were straight meant you were a Nazi, and another begged everyone to wear masks, nothing too unusual for the political ideology Poppy espoused. Let's also not forget that the thumbnails of these videos looked like decomposing remains of an armored skeptic clone from 2014. Perhaps one of the most important like decomposing remains of an armored skeptic clone from 2014. Perhaps one of the most important and hypocritical pieces of content is one video titled "Authoritarian Parenting Can Lead to Abuse." Unsurprisingly, it seems that is exactly what was going on behind the scenes. As previously mentioned, Spawn eventually made a document cataloging the Discord messages they'd sent about the abuse going on at their house. The document noticeably doesn't cover the years 2020 and 2021, probably because Spawn was still under the illusion that Poppy and Xena's behavior was somehow redeemable, believing that it had eventually stopped and normal life would resume. However, after 2 years, not only did nothing improve, but it actually got worse. I can only assume that 2022 is when Spawn worked up the courage to start telling others about what they were going through. Many things documented here aren't that egregious, but instead they serve as proof that Poppy and Xena are only really hypersensitive when it serves them. For example, there's an instance here of Poppy saying that triggers are bullshit, something the majority of their audience would probably be appalled by. But there are some serious claims here as well. In May of 2022, Spawn describes how Xena forbade her from showering because she might need to use the bathroom, without specifying when. The context of this is that Spawn hadn't bathed in days and was walking around in 80-degree heat. Once they got home, Spawn, over text messages, asked Xena for permission to use the shower and got it, only for the permission to immediately be revoked, with Xena saying, "Actually, you should wait until we get home so the dog won't be alone for the 15 to 20 minutes you'll be in the shower for." If this seems like someone making up arbitrary rules just for the pleasure of micromanaging someone else, it's because that's what it is. Just 10 days later, Xena delivers a prolonged browbeating session over text messages, repeatedly telling Spawn not to move any of her things whatsoever, regardless of circumstance. The thing is, they're talking about objects that were sprawled over the couch, and Spawn only moved them to clean the room. In June, we get an exchange in which Poppy is complaining about how long it took Spawn to do the dishes, neglecting the fact that there were 3 days worth of dishes in the kitchen. I'm starting to believe in the horseshoe theory because of this. This is Mussolini tier obsession with punctuality. The trains must run on time. No more chuddies jumping on the bed. Spawn proceeds to complain about this on Discord, saying, "You can't offload 3 days of dishes on me and then get mad when it takes a long time. Then they got mad at me for waking up late and got mad at me for starting my bed routine 30 minutes late. I am 22, but every aspect of my life is time. I still have a bedtime, and they keep moving said bedtime earlier and earlier because of not doing other things on time. I literally have ADHD, autism, and a heart condition. I can't always do things on time, especially especially in the heat because of my blood disorder, which means heat affects me so much worse. I collapsed a few weeks ago, and we don't have an AC and haven't since March. The blood disorder being referred to here
With the Planet Fitness Black Card, you can bring a friend anytime and so much more when you join today.
here is POTS, a condition that can be really debilitating depending on severity. Basically, it means being upright for too long, and excess heat can cause intense fatigue, nausea, and other similar symptoms. Again, for someone with this condition, an AC isn't just a convenience, but can actually keep them functional while indoors. It would be inconsiderate for a regular person to leave their kid with POTS for 3 months without AC, but considering how much Poppy and Xena virtue signal about being supportive and wholesome in their content, it's a highlight of their hypocrisy. In another incident, Spawn went to the kitchen later than usual, only for Xena to tell them they couldn't get lunch anymore. Attached is an exchange between Poppy and Spawn, which went as follows. I get that I was late, but I need food. I should be allowed to get food when I need it. Poppy, we have a schedule in our house. You need to follow that. Xena doesn't get personal time with constant interruptions. While I agree with you that making lunch shouldn't be an issue, in the past, the problem is that often making lunch has been noisy or a time to overly interact with Xena. You are also positive with COVID. That's an issue as well. Please remember that. The schedule as a whole is more important because it will prevent close contact. Spawn explained that being sick made them hungrier than usual, to no avail. I don't know about you, but I find it strange that Poppy is willing to let their biological child go hungry while they're sick, mind you, just to give Xena uninterrupted personal time. The interruption here being noises in the kitchen, which I guess are enough to disturb her precious peace. Another example of this is when Spawn recounts having to go get water from the fridge in order to take their medication, only for this to disturb Xena, who started complaining about how that should have been done ahead of time. The only reason Spawn was doing that was that their tap water was shut off due to maintenance, something unpredictable and not within their control. I have to make a caveat here to say, is Xena sleeping in the kitchen? What kind of arrangement is this that you can't do absolutely anything in the kitchen? Otherwise, the Dark Souls boss that is your furry stepmom will awaken and hurt you. Just a day later, Spawn says, convinced Xena is genuinely trying to starve me. I was about to make spaghetti, and Xena told me to make something quick. I go to make a PB&J, but realize I don't have any jelly, so I ask my parents if I can use their Smucker's brand one, and they say yes. Already put peanut butter on one half of the sandwich at this point, realize the Smucker's jelly is moldy and smells really bad, so I ask if I can use the other jelly in the fridge that's Xena's, for, need I remind you, a single sandwich. Xena says no and says, if I let you use it, then I won't have any left. Poppy has to convince them to let me use their jelly for one singular sandwich. Arbitrarily controlling food intake is a very common kind of abuse of parental authority, and given Xena is on test, as we've already established, it may be the cause of this antagonistic and territorial relationship she developed with Spawn. However, while Xena was the main person behind terrorizing Spawn, Poppy also played a role. Despite regularly complaining that it was Spawn's own fault that their blood disorder acted up, claiming that they weren't eating properly, Poppy did things like labeling and withholding salami, one of the very few sources of protein in the house. I guess the furry thing was realer than I thought. These people are behaving like actual animals and claiming food like they're hunter-gatherers. From acting like putting plastic cups in the dishwasher was unforgivable, to yelling at Spawn for proactively putting up a gate for their dog, a chore that Poppy and Xena had neglected to do for months, it seems there was nothing Spawn could do to please them. To make matters worse, Poppy told Spawn things like, I don't think you can ever repair what you've done to your relationship with Xena, as if she was the one at fault for it deteriorating. Spawn was yelled at for going to the kitchen outside of their allotted time, yelled at for moving furniture to vacuum their bedroom, and punished with more chores. When Spawn complained, Poppy and Xena said that the domestic issues should be discussed during family meetings. But when the time came for these meetings, they either ignored everything or claimed Spawn was in the wrong. Noticing that things were being pushed to their breaking point, Poppy and Xena decided to task Spawn with making a list of things they were upset about, and the list was promptly made. It pointed out that Poppy and Xena didn't respect the strict bathroom and kitchen times, and for things to be fair, everyone should have free access to all common areas of the house. Additionally, Spawn complains that P and Z often didn't do their chores at all, letting them accumulate until Spawn had to do them all. While Poppy and Xena could opt out of doing something if they had a migraine, Spawn had to thug it out no matter how bad their POTS got, and not only get things done, but get them done on time. To add to the previous mention of arbitrarily controlling food intake, not only was Spawn frequently forbidden from entering the kitchen, they also couldn't even bring snacks with them into their room, not even if they were drinks, which people with POTS regularly need to maintain their salt intake and treat their condition. Based on the list alone, it's easy to interpret that while Poppy just seems negligent and occasionally unfair, Xena is systematically abusive. By doing things like limiting Spawn's access to the dog for no reason and deliberately excluding Spawn from meals, it looks as if any source of positive reinforcement was getting cut off. One of the most damning aspects of the control they had was that no money was to be spent without approval approval from Poppy and Xena, even if the money belonged to Spawn, something many people have called financial abuse, since Poppy did, at one point, threaten to freeze Spawn's account. The list was concluded with a warning that if these complaints weren't attended to, Spawn intended to move out. This wasn't an empty threat, since Spawn had been planning to do so already, speaking to an unnamed friend to secure temporary housing in case the abuse worsened. However, Poppy caught wind of this and got mad at Spawn for it. This was Poppy's assessment of the list. Half of the list items were just dishonest, and half of them were partial framings that ignored any context. To be clear, I'm not a perfect parent. I was young, abusive, and shitty when they were young, and dealing with the grief of their mom dying. But I spent 15 years in therapy and Zen Buddhism trying to make up for that shit, only to watch them try to become a wedge between myself and my fiancé. Text messages show Xena becoming upset at merely being asked what her credit score was, despite the context obviously being to help Spawn move out. Poppy and Xena's complete lack of cooperation put the plans to move out on an indefinite hold. Meanwhile, after spending a week at a friend's place, Spawn comes back to find out that the house was so neglected in their absence that actual mold had grown on the counter. Not some moist and dark corner of the house, the kitchen counter. Every attempt to make domestic living less confusing and conflicting was shot down, usually by Xena, who refused to do simple things like use tone indicators over messages to improve communication. Which is, I don't even understand why this is tone indicators.
We have flexible hours that fit your life. Aspen Dental. It's time to smile again.
Indicators are, why are tone indicators needed? Or let Spawn use the microwave after they hadn't eaten anything for 8 hours. On that last part, Spawn did eventually eat 2 hours later, making for a total of 10 hours without food because Xena might get a migraine. Xena refused to drive Spawn to the dentist because she might get a migraine. Xena accused Spawn of lying about their POTS. Xena deliberately used Spawn's mealtime, preventing them from eating anything. Are you getting the picture here? It's important to note that at this point, not only was Spawn paying for rent, but also paying for the food they ate, meaning there was absolutely nothing justifying their lack of authority over anything. The extremely strict rules were bad enough as is, but the fact that P and Z didn't even try to respect them made it all significantly worse. The best example of this is that while you can't even fart in the vicinity of Xena without giving her a migraine, Poppy often barged into the bathroom while Spawn was using it, and when confronted about it, they responded with the following: "If the door's open, I can come in whenever I want. I don't care if it makes you uncomfortable." By November 2022, Spawn still had access to their bank account, but for the entirety of that month, they were forbidden from buying any food that had to be stored in the freezer or fridge, meaning despite having money, they were limited to getting things like granola bars. Spawn was now living under the threat of having their internet access cut off, and with it, communication from friends, which is a telltale sign of abuse and even cult-like behavior. This was done under the excuse that Spawn needed to get a job, but then again, not having access to the internet makes job hunting harder than it needs to be. The stress was so bad that their hair started falling out again. The incidents continued to worsen as the end of the year approached, with Xena yelling at Spawn for getting cereal at 11 a.m. when no one else was in the kitchen. Xena was in her bedroom before deciding to get up and chase after Spawn just to berate them. When Poppy caught wind of this, all they had to before deciding to get up and chase after Spawn just to berate them. When Poppy caught wind of this, all they had to say was, "I'm sorry you felt yelled at." Despite wanting the authority that came with being a parent, Xena hated the idea of actually being a parent and having to care for the person she was lording over. Chores were weaponized as a way to prevent Spawn from being able to see their friends, but whenever this was met with unhappiness, Xena tried to play the victim and claimed Spawn was framing her as abusive. Despite outright saying she didn't want to be Spawn's parent, she threatened to get guardianship custody over them if they didn't get a job. Even when Poppy occasionally relapsed and was minimally nice to Spawn, Xena made sure to intervene and prevent it. In one instance, Poppy was about to let Spawn use the bathroom, unscheduled, but Xena made sure that didn't happen and kept them waiting another 15 minutes. As 2023 began, Spawn was occasionally burdened with over 7 hours of chores, and if they didn't get it done, they lost access to the internet. Bad enough as it already was, there were signs that it was about to worsen. Poppy, in another Munchausen by proxy moment, decided that Spawn had dissociative identity disorder and was actively trying to get her diagnosed with it. This potentially meant that Spawn stood to lose every last bit of their agency and be forced to be under the care of P and Z permanently, not to mention potentially taking psychiatric meds to ensure her compliance. In another example of cult-like behavior, Poppy was withholding Spawn's mail, which almost caused them to lose health insurance. Internet access began being frequently withheld as a punishment for not doing chores up to Xena's satisfaction. The most egregious example of this being when Spawn was told that if they did all of the chores during the weekend, they'd get internet back on Monday. The thing is, when Monday came, the internet didn't, and when Spawn asked about it, they were accused of badgering Poppy and Xena punished them by, you guessed it, withholding the internet. Supposedly, this was because some chore wasn't done, but it wasn't specified which one. When Spawn asked Poppy, they realized neither knew, meaning Xena was keeping both of them in the dark, probably because there was no chore that went undone, and she just wanted to punish Spawn again. This could have been easily rectified with a brief conversation with Xena, but of course, she had a stomach bug and couldn't be bothered. The documented instances of abuse in 2023 become noticeably sparse because at this point, Spawn spent more time without access to the internet than with it. All of it culminated in late April, when, after spending 10 days offline, Spawn listed 2 job-related appointments they needed internet for, only for Xena to say that internet access could only be given if Spawn made a satisfactory offering in exchange. We've officially moved from abusive parent to tyrant all the way to Old Testament pagan deity. Xena does sound like some ancient Babylonian demon, all things considered. However, when Spawn asked what was considered an acceptable offering, Xena told her that she had to figure it out on her own. Later on, as it turns out, this was a test of some kind, and Spawn failed, though I have no clue what that means. If I were to guess, that was just the excuse Xena came up with to explain this obviously insane request. About half a month later, Spawn said they were going out for the day and proceeded to escape through the window, emptying out a trust fund of theirs in order to afford the cost of leaving the house. When talking about this on stream, Poppy inadvertently confesses to not being concerned about their kid whatsoever, and instead just being worried about the money Spawn had taken. This is the degree of lovelessness we're talking about. Imagine if your kid went AWOL and all you thought about was money. From this entire story, you might be wondering if this dynamic duo has made other victims, and the answer is a definite yes. As I mentioned much earlier, Poppy is polyamorous. Though the only partner who's really stuck around through thick and thin is Xena, the other partners are a revolving door of people with differing degrees of relevance. Until around the time Spawn left the house, which is early to mid 2023, there weren't many negative things being publicly said about Poppy and Xena, even if some people already disliked them. However, Poppy's behavior grew more and more erratic. The first sign something was wrong was when replying to a tweet by someone called Aaron, Poppy made a sexual insinuation about them, which was met with only one word: gross. But that's not the important part of the story. Poppy got quite upset about this exchange, saying, "I am a xenogender trans woman who literally uses a neurogender based on being hypersexual and a survivor of CSA." She simply could have said it made her uncomfortable. I would have apologized and deleted the tweet. I also stand by my behavior. I flirt with everyone over 18, and if I cross a line, I will always apologize and make amends. I do not deserve this framing or BS. If you legitimately think I'm in the wrong, block me. It's ironic that this was said because the only reason this rant happened was due to Aaron doing just that, blocking Poppy. Woven through the tweets is the word succubian, a word Poppy uses to describe the xenogender, or maybe the neurogender, whatever it is that's responsible for the unsolicited comments, as if giving it a name made it any less inappropriate. In the same way PMDD and BPD have been used to justify bad behavior so far, Poppy's unhealthy sexual dynamics and compulsive lewdness are excused under the guise of them being succubian. However, we'd soon come to find out this signaled a much deeper problem, one which few knew about. While the situation I'm about to go over happened around the same time, May 2023, information about it only came out in August of that year, when someone named Melina made a Twitter thread accusing Poppy and Xena of being abusive hypocrites. We begin the series of screenshots compiled and shared by Melina, with Xena love-bombing her into sticking around and being extra supportive to Poppy and Xena. If you don't know what love-bombing is, it's when an abuser, consciously or otherwise, overloads their target with positive reinforcement so that when said reinforcement is withheld, they feel inclined to do anything to get it back, becoming easy to manipulate. This is immediately followed by Prince of Poppy talking about the rates paid to their YouTube channel's editors, who are repeatedly referred to as volunteers, so I'm not too sure about the specifics of their arrangement. But regardless of the details, the highlights of these messages is when Poppy admits that being in sexual relationships with multiple of the people working on the channel makes it more difficult to keep things functional. Call me old-fashioned, but being in a relationship with your employees doesn't sound like a good idea. So I understand the temptation. My editor, for example, is in possession of an immense BBL, but I resist the temptation to keep my business afloat. Once Poppy's done talking, Xena shows her true colors and essentially starts berating one of the editors for having gone to just Poppy instead of both of them to talk about their rates, something she claimed was erasing her, prompting her to say, "If anyone's behavior is not up to standards, then they will not be on this team." Now that sounds like the Xena we know. Melina, who happened to be friends with the editor who was getting berated, decided to get on voice call with them, only for Xena to start getting aggressive and yelling nonstop. Sound familiar? Once Melina expressed concern that this may cause more issues in the future, Xena brought up the PMDD. From this point onward, perhaps noticing that Melina wasn't as malleable as other people, Xena became distrustful and even paranoid, in fear that information was being gathered on Poppy and Xena for an eventual expose thread. Turns out Xena was right, almost as if she was self-aware that she was an abuser, fated to eventually be exposed. Just a day later, Xena began doing the same routine she did to Spawn, deliberately not clarifying the tone of text messages and rejecting any attempt from Melina to get on voice chat to minimize miscommunication. It's not too worth it to get into the details surrounding it, but Xena and Melina went back and forth for a long time, with Xena repeatedly implying that while the PMDD excused her attitude, no conditions or triggers could excuse Melina's. This entire thing is so cancer. The conflict between them drove a wedge between Melina and Poppy as well, though the relationship was already fated to fail because Poppy was revealed to be a lot less comfortable with polyamory than they pretended to be. Soon after Melina mentioned that they were going to see another partner, Poppy began producing issues out of thin air about how this should have been talked about earlier, though it was clear that the real problem was that Melina was giving someone else attention. This is a pattern we're going to see with Poppy actually being polygamous instead of polyamorous, meaning they want multiple partners. But the rule is that they have to all be solely loyal to Poppy. Not only is this noticeable with Melina, but Poppy publicly expressed discomfort at the sight of another partner of theirs, Sage, interacting in a sexual manner with another user, though we'll get to Sage later. This is textbook stuff here. First, they love bomb, then, when any kind of issue comes up, they demand unquestioning submission, and if it's not given, they start cutting the person off and making snarky subtweets to psychologically terrorize them. After incessantly messaging Poppy and Xena over the course of weeks to try and patch things up between them, and after Poppy continued leading them on and feeding them false hope, Xena finally dropped the hammer, saying, "You still don't take us seriously, do you? You can't make decisions for me with PMDD. I don't need you in that way, and I don't want you in on my PMDD. I don't think you have the skills to deal with me or Poppy during any kind of mental triggers." Yeah, I don't think anyone has those skills, to be honest. What Xena calls skills to deal with them during mental triggers actually just means putting up with her bullshit. It adds to the overall absurdity that this was said in response to Melina trying to better understand how these conditions affected them. So, you can't ignore the conditions, but you also can't try to understand how they work to prevent them from causing unnecessary conflicts. You can only believe in what Poppy and Xena say because they'd never a violation of consent, and I have absolutely no idea how that works. My guess is that Melina looking into how PMDD works made Xena feel like a scammer getting audited. Someone's about to uncover their racket. After they broke up and Melina left the server, Xena proceeded to post on the server informing everyone about what happened, but of course framing Melina as a toxic person in a variety of ways, none of which reflected what actually went down. A while after their relationship was over and done with, Poppy and Xena continued to rub it in by bringing it up on stream and further besmirching Melina to their audience, only to brush it off when confronted about it, pretending they were actually talking about someone else. Around the same period, Poppy, in a decision influenced by reading lesbian fanfiction, decided to get bottom surgery and create a GoFundMe to finance it. Once that was successful, it was followed by yet another fundraiser, this time for a facial feminization procedure. As small as they were, P&Z had a pretty faithful audience, and Melina's thread didn't do that much damage to their perception in the community. However, much more people also came forward following Melina. The first person who really got the ball rolling on Poppy and Xena's demise was Noah Flake, about whom a Google Doc was made containing an exhaustive amount of their online interactions, showing Poppy doing the same thing they did to Melina, guilt-tripping them about their other partners. Poppy claimed that just seeing one of their own partners online actually gave them a panic attack, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of insane jealousy. The self-obsessed BPD maniac posting was compounded by the fact that, as mentioned earlier, Poppy claims to be plural, and actually has multiple Twitter accounts that interact with one another, publicly talking about the people they're in relationships with and tagging them to make sure they see it. By far, Poppy's obsession with Noah Flake was the worst one, counting the hours until they got to meet. I'll also make a brief caveat here that Poppy referred to Noah Flake as mom, which I just found really weird. The doc has a lot of Discord exchanges between them, which I won't read because neither of us deserve that much torture, but Poppy repeatedly flips from an age-regressed, needy personality to a hyper-aggressive, jealous, and demanding one. To shorten a ridiculously complicated story involving two plural people and their constant switching alters, it seems Noah Flake got sick of the pressure to give Poppy attention all the time and always explicitly reschedule whenever they weren't going to do that, so they broke things off. Or at least they tried to. It's never that easy with Poppy. The breakup breakup crushed Poppy, who was in peak obsession with Noah Flake, and Xena decided to step in, attempting to gaslight Noah about it. In one exchange, when Noah communicates that Poppy is demanding 100% of their time and energy, Xena simply claims that it hasn't happened, and proceeds to blame Noah for Poppy's meltdown using the good old BPD excuse. I'm not even sure what Xena was trying to do here. Argue Noah into unbreaking up with Poppy? How could anything good ever come of that? And to add to the general derangedness of the situation, Xena tries to guilt trip Noah about them agreeing to be the parent to a kid. The kid not being Spawn, but instead being one of Poppy's alters. I can't make this up. Unfortunately, Noah fell for the guilt trip and re-added Poppy, and the following message was written by a 41-year-old grown-up, person. Runs over for hugs.
I love you, and you can't go. You scared me, but I accept your apology.
Squeezes you tightly. Admittedly, there's a lot of context and conversation surrounding this, but this part really takes the cake. I'm going insane reading this. After a bunch of age-regressed, weepy guilt tripping, Poppy sends a random selfie, apparently to elicit some kind of emotion from Noah Flake, ultimately failing, prompting even more weepy guilt tripping, which, mind you, went on for 15 hours straight at one point. All of this was done to convince Noah Flake to meet with Poppy in real life at a hotel. And I'll add that not only were they begging for Noah to come, but they also paid for the flight to get there and the hotel stay, almost $1,000 worth of costs in total. When they finally did meet, they had a sexual encounter initiated by Poppy. But Noah immediately regretted it and finally broke up. Poppy didn't like that, not one bit. On the 23rd of December, this tweet was posted, with Poppy saying, "You broke a mentally ill woman for fun after your headmate was emotionally abusive to me, and you abandoned a child because it was convenient after you sexually took advantage of Poppy to see if you still loved her. Pepper can't be found in Headspace, and it is your fault." And what did we get? Emotional harm, a lot of tears, and possibly a UTI. Well, I have no idea about the UTI. Again, it was Poppy's decision to pay for all of these things, and it was Poppy and Xena pressuring Noah Flake to show up and behave as if they were still together. Poppy even went as far as to claim that Noah owed them money for the flight as if it was their idea. Soon after came more accusations of Noah Flake being abusive, even sexually abusive, in an assault by deception kind of way. They suggested Noah was an absent parent, again in reference to her child alter, and seethed a lot about them having partners besides Poppy, an obvious violation of the whole polyamory thing, but at this point, who's really counting? There's also walls upon walls of text messages Poppy sent Noah over Discord, which I will bless myself with not having to read because they're just stalker tier drivel not worthy of attention. This is your brain on 10,000 years of roleplay, folks. People just become fanfiction characters in real life and purposely fill their lives with demented drama. This is a technically middle-aged person actually reposting cringe, sad illustrations and tagging their ex. Once the news that Poppy accused Noah of SA because they didn't continue dating after having sex hit the community, it finally got a lot of people's attention because of how obviously reprehensible, confusing, and what is even going on? Unlike Noah, Poppy and Xena had a small community to whom they spread their narrative, effectively committing defamation since they were accusing an innocent person of sexual abuse, as some people began rallying to Noah's defense, showing that Poppy was pressuring and badgering Noah to give in to their demands. Other people who had experiences with P and Z decided to come forward as well. One of these people was a former associate of theirs, Dormiu, who recounted their visit to the P and Z household. Poppy maintained a habit of staying up until around 5 or 6 in the morning in the office, the room I was sleeping in. The issue was compounded by the fact that I needed to be out of the room by 11 a.m. so Poppy could attend appointments for clients. I was consistently running on about 5 hours of sleep for the whole week, and as a result, I was overly emotional and had trouble keeping stable. But the lack of sleep was nothing compared to the real reason I'm writing this thread. To make it clear, I was 18 at the time, and I'm only 19 now, and Poppy and I's dynamic was entirely platonic and non-sexual. In the first few days, an incident occurred wherein Poppy had been getting changed and I had been in the living room. Poppy emerged wearing a shirt, underwear, and no pants. I looked away, as I would naturally. Poppy noticed this, and her response was what upset me. Poppy chided me for averting my eyes and invoked my weird asexual bullshit. I am ace, but this had nothing to do with it. Later in the week, I was painting, sitting at Xena's desk in the office, and Poppy had just gotten out of the shower. She came into the office all but naked and sat down opposite me. When I looked up to greet her, I only then noticed that she was topless in front of me, and I immediately looked away, shocked. Poppy then, in an almost confused tone, said, "What? They're my tits." I did not consent to see Poppy in any degree of undress, and she knowingly flashed me while I was a guest in her home. Xena overheard from the kitchen and asked what had happened. When the hilarious anecdote about Poppy exposing herself to me was relayed to Xena, they laughed it off. Just a few days after this drama began to get traction in the community, Sage, another one of Poppy's partners, began defending them them and accusing Noah of SA, as well as painting everyone who'd back Noah up as a bandwagon. Now, there is some lore that I don't think is particularly worth getting into regarding Sage, but I do think it's relevant that screenshots eventually came out that showed Sage aiding Poppy in acclimating minors to explicit stuff on their Discord server. Basically, Poppy was deliberately posting not safe for work furry art, and I use that word loosely, in the safe for work sections of their server, and Sage was defending them doing this. Make of this what you will, but believe me,
it gets worse.
Someone under the name Brit Galaxy Brain on Tumblr made a post saying, Poppy indirectly reached out to me in 2022 to offer her platform to help spread awareness of the individual this blog was made to keep an eye on. Poppy looked at all the evidence I had at the time, it has since grown and gotten much worse, and acknowledged the obvious danger involved. This person, Lily Orchard, has a load of documented evidence dating back to 2008 and a ton of personal testimonies proving she is a PDF file, a zoo file, and a serial abuser. Poppy acknowledged this. Instead of sticking to her word, she defended Lily against the PDF file allegations in public. Despite seeing the chat logs of Lily admitting to being attracted to children on top of the multiple graphic CP fanfictions she has written, Poppy picked multiple arguments with me because I refused to stop calling Lily what she is. I got sick of it and left. Last year, Poppy got in contact with Lily's sibling, whom Lily abused between the ages of 6 and 14, and wrote into damn near every work of fiction she's ever created. Poppy attempted to get involved with Lily's siblings, as well as myself, even going as far as to send incestuous, furry, not safe for work stuff to Courtney. Let me reiterate, Poppy sent incest porn to a survivor of incest. These are very serious accusations and an entirely different can of worms, but it's definitely relevant to Poppy's case. Not only has Courtney, the person mentioned in that text as supposedly being the victim of Lily Orchard, personally backed these accusations up, but Poppy has publicly supported incest as well. Additionally, an old F list of Poppy's, which was unfortunately archived, contained interests with incest in a specified age range that went as low as 14. Remember that whole thing of Poppy calling Noah mom? Yeah. Last but not least, Poppy was also exposed for having shared Spawn's medical records on Discord without their consent and leaked the full name of a client of theirs to their entire Discord chat, violating patient confidentiality, both of which are actual crimes. Mind you, at this time, P&Z were trying to frame all of their accusers as part of a cyber harassment campaign guilty of doxing Poppy simply by using the name they practiced under. One of the most concerning allegations that came out in this wave was from a tweet that read, Poppy also helped to hide Lorelei Bailey, another predator and a federal informant of trans femmes, when it was revealed she was in charge of major survivor resource communities and was trying to build influence in political spheres. In the replies, the poster attached screenshots of Poppy interacting with the supposed alt accounts of this person, said to be a rapist and FBI informant, and at one point, Poppy's partner. There are so many different cans of worms to open when talking about every misdeed of Poppy and Xena that it's impossible to tackle them all at once, and I bet more will come out after this video. But with all of these people attacking them, it begs the question, who was still on their side? Well, my best friend and love interest, Tipster, for one. Tippy was caught lacking when he was called out for liking some of Poppy's horny tweets despite being married, and somehow this turned into Poppy being the victim, culminating in a mass flagging campaign on Boblax's tweet. Another Poppy defender is my greatest fan, Keffels, who collaborated with Poppy and Xena to make anti-Kiwi Farms content, but that relationship also seems to have cooled off as time passed, and Poppy kept dragging Keffels into unrelated drama. At the end of the day, Poppy and Xena were alone to deal with the consequences of their actions, and the community they'd spent years catering to turned their backs on them. At some point, Noah Flake called Poppy's in real life place of employment and left a complaint, and I don't know if this was the direct cause of what I'm about to say, but Poppy was given an ultimatum. Either they would have to stop streaming permanently, or Poppy was going to lose their job. The job was what kept the lights on and the kitchen counter moldy. These two lived in New York and were paying for flights and hotel rooms for their multiple sexcapades, so I'm assuming the job paid well. However, Poppy refused to stop streaming, sealing their fate for good. Of course, this was painted as a violation of their civil liberties and transphobia, but at this point, Poppy and Xena's words were falling on deaf ears. They continued to have an online presence, yelling into the void about how Noah Flake was evil. Unsurprisingly, no legal ramifications ever came of those allegations, since if Poppy told the story to a judge, they'd either get laughed out of court or the judge would die like a Victorian child getting yellow fever. Just having to learn about all of this is too much for an old man to handle. Poppy can still technically practice as a counselor since their license appears to continue to be valid, but I doubt anyone will want to employ someone like that. Most recently, Noah Flake was interviewed by a YouTube channel called Bagman Burns, retelling the story from their point of view. You'd think that after all of this, Poppy and Xena would have some degree of self-reflection about their behavior, but no, not even a little bit. The only way they'd ever consider the possibility they're a bad person is if it's to self-flagellate for empathy or to immediately follow it up by blaming everyone else. So much for the wholesome degenerates, but I tried. I've been Turkey Tom, thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.
So you want to start a business. You might think you need a team of people and fancy tech skills, but you don't. You just need GoDaddy Aero. I'm Walton Goggins, and as an actor, I'm an expert in looking like I know what I'm doing. GoDaddy Aero uses AI to create everything you need to grow a business. It'll make you a unique logo. It'll create a custom website. It'll write social posts for you and even set you up with a social media calendar. Get started at GoDaddy.com/Aero. That's GoDaddy.com/AIRO.
It's rare that I can't yap up a wacky intro, but learning about this menace has left me stunned. I just saw this video from EWU Body Cams about this guy that would hide cameras in like every bathroom on the planet, it seems like. I wouldn't be surprised if he's got hidden cameras in my own porcelain throne territory there. Like he's infiltrated my domain and is filming me.
I'm calling because we just received an anonymous tip that someone has a camera in our employee bathroom and is uploading videos online.
You still haven't raised my charges. What's our charges? You're not supposed to be judgmental to anybody's crimes, by the way.
What the hell is even that? You're not supposed to be judgmental of crimes? I don't remember hearing that in the Miranda rights. I can't even really imagine that. Like, you show up to a murder scene, you catch the suspect, and you just happen to say, like, hey, buddy, look, I don't mean to be judgmental here, but you strike me as a bit of a jerk for this, you know, taking a lot of human lives here. I know, sue me, I don't mean to judge. I feel like as far as judgment goes, crimes are a pretty solid one for people to form an opinion on, rightfully so. If you are found guilty of secretly recording thousands of people using the restroom, you're a fucking freak, and people will judge you as such.
On July 19th, 2022, the police in Ann Arbor, Michigan responded to the Briarwood shopping mall after receiving this unusual call about video footage from a store bathroom being uploaded online. Horrifically, the resulting investigation into a tech-savvy peeping Tom would spread throughout the city of Ann Arbor. The final number of cameras and victims is enough to make your skin crawl.
It's not exaggerating either. It actually did, by the end of this investigation, have my fucking jaw on the floor with how many cameras and how many videos and how all over the place it was. There wasn't a bathroom in Michigan that was spared his peeping. Like, this guy is like the supervillain of shitters. There was nowhere safe, no porcelain throne left unsullied by his eyes. His near omniscient eyes. He dedicated his whole life, put his soul into his craft of spying on every bathroom in Michigan. He was literally like the architect from The Matrix.
This morning it was my boss who took the phone call. I don't know what time it was this morning from a restricted number. He was like, it's a restricted website, you're not gonna find it, but I just wanted to let you know.
The responding officer headed to the bathroom to take a look for herself. Notably, the bathroom was usually reserved for employees.
Like sideways, yeah, on that shelf. But, I mean, I don't know how another can be tiny.
Police would learn soon enough that the employees at Altered State were not the only ones to have their privacy violated. In an unanticipated shocker, the police would find over 200 hidden camera videos from no less than 7 different bathrooms throughout the city over the next month and a half.
So this was the first domino to fall here that led them down this crazy trail. They found so many cameras and videos from this guy. It was like actually hunting Riddler trophies in the Arkham series. It was crazy. He violated so many people's privacy, spied on so many people, and it turns out this is only the tip of the iceberg because he actually has a previous case very similar to this and had in his possession 7,000 videos of unclothed or partially clothed individuals that he filmed without their consent. 7,000! That's more than like all of Markiplier's uploads since he started YouTube. That is an unbelievable amount. And that was in the course of 5 years from 2010 to 2015. We'll get to that here in a little bit, but this guy's entire life has been dedicated to violating people's privacy.
All were filmed without consent between January and July 2022. Horrifically, this included illegal images of children. The depravity didn't stop there. When searching the offender's laptop, the police found he had engaged with online adult websites where images and personal information of unknowing victims were distributed. Police suspected the culprit intended to participate in such exchanges after they found additional images of the victims taken from social media downloaded to his laptop.
Just when you thought it couldn't get worse. So, it's pretty clear he was also sharing these with other fucking evil creeps out there, and was even distributing personal information of the people that he would identify through these hidden cameras. So, from the sound of things, he would broadcast this onto restricted websites, and additionally, he also had illegal images of children. This guy is legitimate evil.
Even though the anonymous caller believed the video he saw was a live stream, he could have been mistaken. The working theory was that the culprit could have put the camera up at the start of a shift and then taken it home to upload the footage.
So, back to what started this whole trail of breadcrumbs that they followed was an anonymous caller tipped them off that at this altered state in this restroom, there was a live stream of people using that bathroom, of course being non-consensually filmed. And so, officer went to the scene, they searched high and low for a camera, but they couldn't find it, but they did see that a lot had been, adjusted and moved around. So it's not that they completely disregarded this as just some kind of phony baloney nonsense. It's one of those things where they started speculating, well, maybe it wasn't a live stream, maybe they had taken the camera home and uploaded the footage to those sites, and the caller was just mistaken thinking that it was live.
Something else the anonymous caller said prevented the current lack of evidence from stonewalling the investigation. The man fitting the caller's description was 36-year-old Eric Deshaun Morton. This was not his first run-in with police.
But everyone said he was going to the bathroom a lot last night, and they thought that he just was trying to not work.
It seemed likely that Eric was up to something far more nefarious than just slacking.
Yeah, jacking. This disgusting asshole has an entire history of doing shit like this. The anonymous caller was telling them about someone that could have been behind it, and the person they described fit this man's description. So they looked into him a bit. They were talking about how the previous night he was going to the bathroom a lot. I guess he drank way too much soda, so he just had the big-time pee-pee, a lot of urine in his bladder. But they speculated, this is probably when he was setting up the camera or tending to the camera.
Especially when the manager added that he made a habit of using the ladies' restroom rather than the men's room. When he was previously asked about this, Eric made the excuse that he used the ladies' room because it was stocked with gloves, which he said he liked to wear while he worked.
A bulletproof defense right there. It's watertight. Man rolled a 20 on the charisma check. That was impressive. So, he had a habit of using the ladies' room, and his reason for it was, well, they have gloves there. I like gloves. Checkmate. Damn, his story checks out. This guy's good.
After learning that Eric's son was present, the officers decided to uncuff him. They escorted his son outside to play and brought out some snacks to keep the child occupied while the search progressed. A pen camera containing a micro SD card was connected via USB. When going through one of the bedrooms, they found a small black bag containing more hidden cameras, some of which were like the pen camera found in the living room. Computer forensics experts discovered his stash of more than 200 secretly recorded videos of people using the bathroom.
Unsurprisingly, the authorities didn't necessarily buy the excuse he used for the ladies' room being the really nice gloves that they have stocked in there. So they ended up getting a search warrant. They then arrived at his abode. He mentioned his son was there, so they brought his son outside to play while they searched the house. While searching, they found tons of hidden cameras. They even found a pin camera that was actively plugged into a computer. So you had all these Mission Impossible doodads and gadgets, all of which used for surveillance, hidden surveillance. And they confiscated some packages and a lot of this for evidence. And then eventually, the forensics experts found his stash, which was 200 videos of people using the bathroom. Which, maybe there's a perfectly valid explanation. Maybe he was just checking to make sure they weren't doing back-to-front wiping, because, that in and of itself is a sin. Maybe he was just looking out for people's well-being, ensuring proper wiping technique, Maybe there's a perfectly justifiable excuse that he was secretly recording all of these people. Authorities got an arrest warrant. They went to his other job at a hotel and arrested him there, which surprisingly was not his first run-in with the authorities. In fact, in 2015, he was arrested for very similar things.
He'd previously been arrested back in 2015, coincidentally by some of the same officers. In May 2015, Eric was arrested after a woman caught him filming her through a peephole while she used a porta-potty. Further investigation revealed more of Eric's disturbing behavior.
He tried to film a stranger through a porta-potty peephole. I didn't even know porta-potties had peepholes. I'm assuming he custom built that himself, fucking threw a glory hole in there and used it to film people. Or maybe he, like, built his own, like, sound stage that looked like a porta-potty so it could film people. I don't know. It's fucking crazy, though. The lunacy knows no bounds. And he would actually proudly post about shit on Twitter, too. So, like, they bring up tweets here. Like, the first one they show about him cleaning out his phone. And then he has the gall to say, "In Jesus' name."
In 2022, Eric was confronted by a coworker who found a camera disguised as a phone charger in the women's restroom. It was plugged in and facing the toilet. Eric insisted it was a regular phone charger and fled with the device. Unsurprisingly, he was fired from his job.
I'm assuming this footage they're showing comes from his Twitter, or maybe like he had a TikTok account where he's doing this loser shit like Naruto running while doing a 360. I have no idea. But it is unbelievable the links he would go to for this depravity. So he had a hidden camera phone charger, like this fucking crazy, like, spy gadget that he plugged into a wall outlet in the bathroom and had faced the toilet. Like, you can't trust any household objects in Michigan while this guy was on the loose. I didn't realize technology reached the point where we could disguise phone chargers as hidden cameras. So good on the astute observer that happened to pick up on that and then confronted him about it, which of course he denied, and then he snatched it away and Naruto ran off into the distance. But, like, it's just crazy. Like, there was nothing sacred in bathrooms across Michigan. You think that that's a skid mark in the toilet from a previous poop? Nope. Actually a hidden camera from Eric. You think your parents are actually your parents? Nope. Actually DARPA drones that Eric designed for the sole purpose of trying to convince you to go to the bathroom so they could spy on you for Eric's hard drive. Like, it's unbelievable how many cameras he was setting up in bathrooms across the entire area.
The case escalated to a whole new level when the police found an appalling 7,000 videos of unclothed or partially clothed people in Eric's possession. Some had even been recorded in a private residence. They also found images taken up women's skirts, which suggested he had a camera device attached to his shoe. This particular unpleasant collection dated all the way back to 2010.
7,000 videos. And also, turns out he was a notorious upskirt pervert creep. He put a camera on his shoes so he could take those pictures. And I'm guessing by that tweet would even post it on Twitter. Like, he would publicly post the upskirts, it seems. Or at least some of them. What? Also, it turns out he was arrested in 2006, but that one had actually been scrubbed from the records. That shit was like the cloning planet from Star Wars. Like, it had just been removed from the archives because of a program to try and help young first-time offenders or something like that. Anyway, he posted his $100,000 bail. He did get picked up again later. Turns out him getting arrested didn't mean shit to him. In fact, through some of what they recovered, they were able to actually figure out the timing of a good chunk of it. And some of it he had recorded after being discharged the same day. So he just kind of viewed getting arrested as like a nuisance. It wasn't actually a deterrent or anything for him. It was just kind of like a bump in the road, like he hit a pothole. So now all of a sudden he would have less videos that day, but he still went right back to it the second he had the ability to. It's fucking nuts. And then, in the back of the police car, this is where that clip in the beginning comes from. He then tries like a bunch of like weird conversational tactics and gotchas to try and like, I don't know, strengthen his case of innocence while in the back. And that eventually leads him to stating that the officer is not supposed to be judgmental of crime. So now he starts to try and lecture the officer on morality.
You're not supposed to be judgmental to anybody's crimes, by the way. I need your badge number, by the way.
I didn't do anything. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, when I say I do worse, when you say I do worse stuff when I was getting in the car.
No, when you said
you're not supposed to do that.
Don't fight. I said, you're right. It's worse.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to do that.
Why am I not?
Because you're not supposed to judge crimes. You're supposed to be.
What are you talking about?
All right, man.
Not exactly Phoenix Wright, but a very interesting tactic to try nonetheless. You judged my crime, I'm going to need your badge number, you're not allowed to do that. And the officer's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I didn't even do that.
In 2024, Eric was convicted of 13 felonies. Eric was sentenced to 8 to 20 years and will not be eligible for parole until 2030. The true number of Eric Morton's victims, along with the identity of the anonymous caller who started the investigation, will likely never be known.
They successfully identified 15 victims, and Eric was convicted on these 13 felonies, so he's facing 8 to 20 years. Ideally, he'll get the full 20 behind bars, but the thing is, even 2 decades in the slammer, I feel like the day he gets released, he's going right back to it. He's hopping right back in the saddle. He has been doing this for over a decade, and no matter how many times he's been taken into custody and arrested, or even been in jail for these crimes, he then gets right back to it. Like, this is, to him, his life's mission. This is why he was put on this earth. To compromise bathrooms. It's fucking sickening. Anyway, though, I wanted to just talk about this a little bit. This story just had me stunned. So yeah, that's really about it. See ya. A Reddit moderator just made a video directly speaking to and tugging on the heartstrings of the CEO of Reddit. He's making a big call to action after he had been stripped of his position as top mod on r/livestream fail. I'm kind of at a loss for words here. I can't believe what I just watched was genuine and not a skit. But this seems authentic. What you picture in your head when you hear the term Reddit mod is exactly what you are about to see unfold in the flesh. The reason this mod just lost his position is because he was promoting a scam on a subreddit that he was the top mod for. Livestream failed. I made 2 videos covering this. It was the $1 Million Fan Show, which was paraded around as a $20 million reality television show for streamers' fans to sign up and even paid entry into it to compete for, $20 million prize purse. Turns out the whole thing was a load of baloney, as it appears everything has been wiped off the face of the planet. So some viewers paid money for actually nothing. They flushed it down the shitter, and agencies that brought this to streamers were left embarrassed. Most notably, Mythic Talent was the one that was named by some of the streamers as their agency that took them this deal, where seemingly no due diligence was done on behalf of Mythic to confirm whether or not this was even legitimate in the first place as a paid promotion. It was supposed to be an Amazon production, but clearly it was not an Amazon production, and it took 2 seconds of going to the website to deduce that this was fraudulent, but
there is a lot about the job that isn't actually that fun that I have now automated away.
Reddit is one of the largest sites on the internet, used by millions of people every single day. But, as with any publicly accessible website, it's also host to a number of questionable individuals. White Bowser is one such individual. A prolific member of some very unique subreddits. An anime gooner. A man who's obsessed with talking about lolcows to hide his own shady past. Because what White Bowser doesn't want you to know is that he grew a minor, and he's been spending the past few years trying desperately to talk his way out of it. Born Earl David Doobie, White Bowser is a 31-year-old autistic man from Shelby, Michigan. While not much is known about Earl's early life, it appears he had a promising future ahead of him. According to one of his high school teachers, they envisioned him making a career out of digital animation, and he did follow that path, eventually graduating with a bachelor's degree in fine arts and game art. However, he was never able to do much with this degree, as he spent the majority of his life after college working odd jobs and living at his mother's house. But the story of White Bowser truly begins like all great internet tragedies, on Discord. Ironically, Earl's infamy sparked on Discord servers owned by Smokey MCC and Kiwi Tapes, 2 YouTube content creators who dissect the events and a general history of lolcows. For almost a year, Earl casually engaged in discussion in Smokey's Discord server without drawing any negative attention to himself. That was until one fateful night when a fellow member of Smokey's server, who was a US Army veteran who had recently returned home, began venting about his poor mental state after serving, stating he was in a dark dark place and dealing with depression. Earl decided to respond to this distressed soldier, not by consoling him, but instead by suggesting that he should take his own life if it was really that bad. Whether or not this was meant as a joke or a genuine suggestion is hard to figure out, but Earl did claim in private messages that it was simply a joke and apologized. Although the veteran was rightfully upset about it and responded with anger, explaining that he'd lost as many as 10 friends to what Earl was joking about, including one that did it right in front of him. But Earl's empathy quickly wore thin, and he began complaining about how tired he was, telling the veteran to stop in all caps over and over again. Clearly, his apologetic attitude wasn't a fully genuine expression of regret. More so, it was just Earl trying to make the situation go away as fast as possible, which is something of a pattern with him, as we'll see. This incident painted a target on Earl's back moving forward. Other members of the server began grilling him in voice calls in an attempt to learn more about him and what made him say such a thing. One notable detail that came up was his affinity for two Japanese animations titled Freezing and Towawa on a Monday, which were what is typically referred to as eki anime, essentially meaning they are softcore adult animation. The thing is, the two animes in specific that Earl watched happened to feature ample-breasted high school students and genetically engineered young women, which is to say that they were pretty frowned upon by the moderation on the server, who banned him immediately upon finding out about his strange interest. Despite being digitally absent from the server moving forward, White Bowser still remained in the minds of the other members, and his large digital footprint would only serve to harm his reputation further. It wasn't long before users discovered Earl's Reddit account, which contained a plethora of bizarre activity. Some of the posts are just hilarious, like the time he showed off his yachts on r/big butt problems, but others are more disturbing, such as multiple posts where he claims to be the father of a young girl in the 4th grade. Not only does Earl not have a daughter, he's also admitted that he's currently still a virgin.
Hold up, are you a virgin? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Now, obviously, it's not totally out of the ordinary for a man in his mid-20s to early 30s to want to have a daughter if they don't have one, but it is particularly strange that Earl was fantasizing about having one on Reddit. And there are two prominent posts from that same Reddit account that truly bring Earl's character into question. For starters, Earl spent a bizarre amount of time on the subreddit r/big boob problems, which is a place for generously endowed women to vent, discuss, and ask for advice in regards to the difficulties that come from being, well endowed. One post in particular that Earl made to the subreddit showed him being lambasted by a fellow member, implying that a post he made was sexist. Earl later explained his reasoning for frequenting the subreddit, claiming that he was simply investigating users.
What I wanted to do was I wanted to do a little bit of internet research. I wanted to cross-reference and check if people from our big boob problems were cross-posting on another subreddit to see if they were karma farming.
What is it? Yeah, that's like really creepy that you're trying to find the other accounts of these women who are like, who gives a shit if they're karma farming?
I admit I wanted to be a little internet detective, but sure, you can call me weird for that.
It really made no sense that Earl was concerned about the integrity of women on the big boob problems subreddit. Even if there were, I guess, bad actors using the forum to get attention, this realistically is not a problem that should affect him in any way. The reality is, Earl almost certainly used these forums for unintended purposes, and his investigation was more akin to research. But the most infamous discovery from his Reddit account was one that would haunt him forever. The day my life turned into an anime, a nearly 2,000-word Reddit post in which Earl admits to accidentally groping a 17-year-old girl. Disclaimer, this is the story of a man who flew too close to the sun. Some background on me. I'm highly religious and was raised to believe in Jesus Christ, God, forgiveness, and all the love. Naturally, always going to church on the weekends and praying for all those weaker and poorer than me made me feel like I was secure in my life. And also, I was a man who absolutely adored the idea of making movies. So much so that when the opportunity came that I got a job at a movie theater, I thought I had literally hit the lottery. Earl described this job as the American dream and claims to have been a model employee at his local movie theater. He picked up extra shifts whenever he could and even refused to leave when he was supposed to, opting instead to spend time chatting with coworkers or catching a movie off the clock. His job at the movie theater was so easygoing that he didn't even feel compelled to use swear words anymore. He described the job as heaven on earth, as he had become the self-described spirit of the workplace.
Diabetes isn't a death sentence, but it is absolutely a life sentence. After the meeting with Susan Collins for my wife and son, my wife came back. She was 10 feet tall. She felt like we had a powerful advocate on our side. Thank you, Senator Collins. Please continue delivering for T1 families.
Coming up on this episode of Mind the Game. Us winning was forcing the networks to have to talk about basketball. And I know that's hard sometimes for some people to talk about basketball. So they quickly shifted it to how can we make this lame-ass conversation
However, one fateful night, White Bowser's paradise shattered in an instant. One night, I was working behind the popcorn counter and was called over by my boss for a nightly team meeting. At the end of the speech, one of my best friends in the movie theater, who I absolutely had a man crush on, even though I was straight, put his hand in the middle of the crowd. Now, he always did this, and everyone was expected to do the same, like a sort of Power Rangers-esque fashion. And everyone would shout, "Go movie theater!" However, one girl in the group did not want to do it, and she began walking away before everyone had a chance to put their hands in the middle. Not knowing what was going on in her head or why she was walking away, I instinctively swung my arm around and grabbed her shoulder from the back. What happened next, to this day, I still have no memory of, because it happened too darn fast. She turned around faster than lightning and said, "You better hustle." And yes, I'm not even sure that's what she said because I don't remember. Also, when she turned around at breakneck speed, my hand moved from grabbing the back of her shoulder to the front of her chest. And this all happened within the span of 5 seconds. When she stormed off, I was just standing in shock with all my coworkers behind me, and they were all looking at me, and all I could say was, I should not have done that. That's right, Earl somehow managed to grope this girl in an attempt to do a Power Rangers super chant. This sounds like a bit out of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
I was trying to feel your breast.
The rest of the shift was described by Earl as awkward, and his boss eventually sent him home for the day. In the meantime, his boss began an internal investigation with his fellow female coworkers to determine if Earl had ever made them feel uncomfortable. Despite his belief that the girls who worked with him at the theater liked him, apparently it was far from the case, as all of them reported feeling mistreated and uncomfortable when he was around. Earl felt betrayed and implied he blamed the women for not telling him that he made them uncomfortable. As a result, he took an uncharacteristic break from work, clocked out, left the theater, and sobbed in his car as he drove home. Earl didn't go back to the theater for the following 3 weeks, and when he did, he noticed the girl from the Power Rangers incident wasn't present anymore. A week after his return, his former manager pulled him aside to tell him that she had apparently been so traumatized from the situation that she had requested for Earl to no longer be allowed to hang out at the theater. Distraught, he once again ran out of the theater crying. In a last-ditch effort to right his wrongs, he sent a text message to the manager of the theater, saying, "I was told I can no longer linger at the movie theater, even if it's to say hi to old friends. I was also told that because of that accident that happened with that girl, that I now gave her PTSD. If this is the case, you will no longer see me come to the movie theater as a customer. This will be my final message to all my friends I made. If forgiveness and reconciliation cannot be facilitated between this situation, then I would rather go to a different theater." In his closing statement on the Reddit post, he expressed his desire to apologize to the girl and even offered to get beaten up by her boyfriend as a token of reconciliation. But with this newly discovered accidental incident and Earl's previous admittance to enjoying underage anime, many in the Discord came to the conclusion that he was a creep. Consequently, detractors began flooding his private Discord server and hurling insults at him, accusing him of being a danger to children. His first attempt at trying to squash the rumors surrounding his proclivities came a few days later, with a video titled "The Argument Between Anime and Philia."
I admitted that I found scenes from the Japanese cartoons called Tawawa Monday and Freezing to be sexually attractive. For context, the female cartoon characters in this anime are portrayed and drawn to be hypersexualized on purpose by the manga artists. But on that basis alone, that labels me as a because those females in the cartoon are below the age of 18.
In the same video, Earl explains that these new allegations left him in a state of depression, and he had decided to seek counsel. Apparently, both his psychiatrist and therapist told him that he wasn't some kind of creep. He then differentiated between what he called ego-sanic and ego-alien. He identifies his ego-sanic with Chris Chan, showing no remorse, shame, or guilt for his actions. Ego-alien, on the other hand, he identifies with his true self, who gets very distraught at the prospect of being framed as some kind of creep, leading him to get panic attacks. He goes on to state that he will sue anyone who continues to call him a creep, and makes a major announcement, which is that he would only be playing Genshin Impact in solo mode past that point in time. I don't know why he felt the need to announce that last part, but it is pretty funny that he paired those two announcements together. Now, the story could have ended here, as White Bowser's notoriety was relegated to a handful of Smokey's Discord members. I mean, weird people on Discord are hardly rare. If you're trying to become a notorious one, frankly, you have some really tough competition ahead of you. However, one user did see potential, and that user was an individual named MF Goon, who told White Bowser that Smokey MCC, infamous horror cow Cyrax, and Cyrax's most well-known troll, Music Biz Marty, were all colluding to create a content farm. MF Goon provided no proof of any of it, and it was a completely fabricated claim. But that didn't stop Earl from using this against Smokey. In a live stream, Earl alleged that Smokey was a PDF file, his logic being that Smokey's association with Cyrax was enough to earn him that title.
All I said was I find anime attractive. That's all I freaking said is I find anime attractive. And yet you guys are actually in cahoots with a literal or someone who likes to associate themselves with a file for money.
A few days after his video, YouTuber Kiwi Tapes decided to restream one of Bowser's Genshin Impact live streams.
And when I ran across him streaming Genshin Impact one day, I decided to restream him. And when he found out about this, his chat started asking him to hop on panel with me. And with a lot of help, he agreed, but only because he expected me to pay him at the end.
Under the false pretense of receiving a percentage of Kiwi's donations, Bowser joined a call with him in which he was questioned over a handful of different allegations he had received. Most notably, however, was the revelation of Bowser calling in a bomb threat, something that Kiwi Tapes knew nothing about at the time.
We got another 5 from Nomags. Ask Bowser about the bomb threat. Bomb threat you triggered? They're saying you're a domestic terrorist.
Why do we have to go over that?
Despite how many detractors he'd already gotten himself, no one would have guessed that White Bowser would get put in a psych ward over the following comment. Dear Strongbad, ever noticed how creepy Homestar Runner has been acting? I think the King of Town should address this. P.S. Don't go to the movies with him anymore. Sincerely, Viklas Sweden. This comment is a reference to an online animation series called Homestar Runner. The character Strongbad has a dedicated segment to reading email submissions from viewers. As to why this commenter chose to make this specific reference, it's likely due to the similar speech patterns of White Bowser and Homestar Runner. For all intents and purposes, this is nothing more than a light jab at Earl, making fun of his Fortnite accent and creepy behavior at the movie theater.
Yeah, I figured I'd just cut up some ice bowl lettuce.
But Earl really read between the lines here and interpreted this as a bomb threat. A little bit of a side note, but anyone in the comments section telling me to do the Charleston, making insane accusations about my haircut, or anyone hopping on this Tom the Type of Guy trend will be interpreted as threats against my life, and I will get the police involved. You've been warned. Moving on, without a second thought, Earl sprung into action and rushed to form his former employees before it was too late. And we know all of this happened thanks to a police report. When the police arrived at the scene, they interviewed the manager, Mike, who clarified there was no threat to the theater. He did not believe the YouTube comment Earl had received was any credible threat worthy of attention. If anything, he apparently believed that the entire fiasco was simply Earl trying to get attention from the previous Power Rangers incident with that girl. The cops then interviewed Earl, at which point they came to the conclusion that he was mentally unwell. Earl also notably lies about his reasoning for coming to the theater, falsely claiming the police department told him to do it. Caught with his foot in his mouth, he strangely segued into the details of the groping incident unprovoked, specifically claiming that he touched her chest for 10 seconds. All of this resulted in Earl being taken to the hospital and subsequently trespassed from ever returning to the theater. However, his time being institutionalized would do very little in dissuading him from pushing the issue, as we'll soon come to find out. This was only one of the many topics discussed in Kiwi Tapes' first initial discussion with Bowser. And the tone of the overall conversation, which was definitely not friendly on Kiwi Tapes' part, makes it all the more confusing that Earl suggested the idea of teaming up with him to start a podcast together.
He wanted a platform where he could share his excuses with a wide audience. And after I re-streamed him, I think he believed I was on his side, because a day later, I got an offer to start a weekly podcast called 110 Autism.
The name 110 Autism is a reference to Earl's self-reported 110 IQ, which is a name he supposedly came up with himself. While he was told he would serve as a co-host and receive a percentage of the donations from the streams, it was all a ruse. In reality, the 110 Autism podcast served as an excuse to continue questioning Earl and farming content. Viewers would be allowed to call in and also present him with questions that almost always ended with Earl making himself sound even worse, somehow. Not even 10 minutes into the first episode, we already get a glimpse into how disconnected from reality he truly is. One caller intended to question him about his presence and subsequent ban on the r/big boob problem subreddit, and he makes a reference to a comment Earl made being deleted. However, Earl misheard him and believed he said that the entire subreddit had been deleted, which caused this reaction.
On your Reddit account, there was a particularly odd subreddit that we saw that you were in at some point, and I'm curious on the nature of this post. Because it was long deleted, but it was a particular subreddit. I can't remember the name to save the life of me, but it was a subreddit for women that share.
Wait,
their
that was
problems with
deleted?
having,
That was deleted?
It was, yes, whatever it was deleted. It's a Reddit. It's a I don't know what the name is. It's a Reddit for women who. Hold on. Whoa, hey, you're getting. We're getting hyped up real early in the stream
Yeah,
here, boys.
holy crap.
This caller was attempting to question what his intentions were when engaging on the subreddit, heavily implying that he was harassing women in the community, but all Bowser could focus on was the backlog of huge mommy knockers being lost to time. To make matters worse, Earl carelessly admits that he has fapped too many posts on the subreddit. But of course, this wasn't even the tip of the iceberg for this podcast, and Earl only continued to make a fool out of himself. He bizarrely decides that it's appropriate to tell a story of a zoo trip visit with his younger cousin.
When I went to the zoo with my little cousins and everyone and my whole family, I went to the zoo with them, and one of my littler cousins, not me, he pointed at a zebra's, cock. He pointed at it, and he was really small. He pointed at it, saying, "Hey, why does that cock look like a black dong?" So I said to my little cousin, like, "Oh wow, I guess all mammals look the same." And then my older cousin looked at me and just gave me the stupidest freaking look ever.
Neither of these stories do Earl any favors in beating the allegations, and neither do his comments regarding his enjoyment of Chihuahua on a Monday. For further context, Chihuahua is a show about a 15-year-old schoolgirl who has a sexual relationship with an older man named Oni-san. While the older man's age is never directly stated, it's reasonable to assume he is, at the youngest, in his mid to early 20s, effectively making this anime about a high school girl being groomed. Even spending a few minutes on the fandom wiki goes to show how strange this show is, with girls even younger than the main character having their bust measurements listed, and a plethora of other young characters being groomed. But weirdly enough, Earl just couldn't shut his mouth about this. Instead, he actively admitted to pleasuring himself to the show, and only continued to defend himself on the podcast. As moments later, he asks for a direct source that the characters are actually high school teenagers, and also says that if they are minors, it's disgusting. At one point, he states that his previous actions don't reflect the person he is today, specifically stating that it's in the past. But when asked if watching Chihuahua is also in his past, he says this.
So the Chihuahua was in the past?
You know what? Yeah, you know what? For the sake of this podcast, we're gonna say that's in the past too. I'm gonna start.
What's in the past? I don't believe you.
Wait, oh, you don't believe me? Ah.
No, you said just for the sake of this podcast.
Oh.
Yeah, nobody's gonna believe that.
You know, oh yeah, you're right.
On top of not being too convincing to the other members of the panel, it gets even stranger when he promises to be dry while watching the show moving forward. Aside from the horrible image I'm sure that paints in your head, he clearly doesn't really have any reservations with continuing to watch a show about a teenager being groomed, as long as he doesn't personally goon to it anymore. This is also something he would later contradict himself on when he stated the main reason he watched the show was because the characters have large breasts.
Bowser, you gotta admit something right now, bro. You gotta be honest with me, alright? You gotta be honest with me.
Okay.
You're saying this because you don't want to have to admit that it's dumb. You are attracted to that, but you do not want to admit it right now. Am I true? Am I saying facts?
Well, I have to say I no longer support it, but yeah, it's true.
This entire interaction demonstrates how insincere nearly any apology he gives truly is. Despite initially arguing that the characters being minors didn't matter, he changes his disposition to appease the other members of the panel, likely realizing it was the only way to get them off his back. He even goes as far as to say that the creators of the show manipulated him, simply because he doesn't recall the ages being specified.
If I may interject, it's rather obvious that they're going to be probably under 18 in the first place, because first of all, they're like first or second year in high school.
But it never says that though.
But you know for a fact that they're not seniors in high school.
Yeah, well,
and they look young. So I don't. It's at least to me.
And you've admitted in past videos, Bowser, that you know that these manga artists draw them in a way that shows them.
Yeah, and you know what? I gotta be real with you. It is tough that they do that.
The fact that these characters are in high school should make it easy to determine whether they're teenagers or not. This part of the discussion concludes in Bowser reaffirming that he's not a creep in any way, shape, or form, which immediately gives way to the topic of the movie theater groping incident. Earl starts out saying that the girl wasn't under the age of consent, claiming that her twin sister had told him she was already 18 months before everything transpired. As the conversation continued, Earl gets caught in a lie, claiming that he was 27 when he had groped this girl, despite him previously saying he was 24 on Discord. At first, he plays coy, pretending as though he didn't recall saying this, before quickly admitting that he had intentionally lied, and then conceding to having a lying problem.
And then I feel maybe if I tell them the exact right lie, they'll tell me the truth and say they're suicidal, so I can save their life next. And that's...
So you play on suicidal people.
But that also doesn't explain why you lie to, like...
What does it have to do with being true and honest?
Yeah.
It
and you're talking about one
doesn't.
specific circumstance under which you might lie, not like why you lie to us.
It doesn't though. It doesn't explain it, but if I tell them of the lie and they tell the truth, I will then know the truth and therefore can stop the truth from happening.
That's right, the guy who told a depressed army veteran to take himself out actually really cares about people taking their own lives, and believes that lying to people in that situation makes them tell the truth about their ideation, thus allowing him to save them. If you think that doesn't make any sense, you're right on the money. Earl concedes that it doesn't make any sense, yet pretends that since he's witnessed so many people taking their own lives, that it's how he learned to behave, almost as a trauma response. The conversation takes a quick shift when Kiwi asks Bowser if there are any minors in his own personal Discord server, and he answers yes, referencing a specific user named T. This question was very calculated, as both Kiwi and Smokey already knew the answer, because an unnamed individual in Smokey's Discord had infiltrated the White Bowser server, privately messaging Earl while posing as a 17-year-old girl. Bowser had no idea about this until Smokey dropped a bombshell.
Why would you keep her there?
And why'd you tell her to never tell anybody?
Oh. Because I was worried, because I saw...
Bowser claims that he wanted to keep her age a secret because she had been doxxed and harassed by other members, and believed that her being a minor would only paint a bigger target on her back. Of course, that makes no sense at all, and if anything, should have been an indication to not have minors hanging around, but this is the White Bowser we're talking about after all. Earl claims that he told her directly that she was too young to be talking to him, yet for some reason, this didn't prevent him from engaging with her and allowing her to continue being a member of his server. This issue was pressed further when a user by the name of Cow Wrangler joined the panel. Cow Wrangler has been described by Smokey as Bowser's mortal enemy, as she's extremely provocative, confrontational, and aggressive with Earl when speaking with him, and she definitely does justice to that title.
Bowser, have you ever acknowledged the fact that you make people deeply uncomfortable, and that at your workplace, you're probably that guy that a lot of the women wouldn't admit it, but they didn't like because you're creepy? Have you thought about the fact that you've been run out of several subreddits because of your bizarre behavior towards any woman that comes towards your way?
Cow Wrangler lambasts Earl for everything we've discussed so far. The big boob problem subreddit, Tawawa on a Monday, the groping incident, and of course the recently revealed 17-year-old girl he was privately messaging.
Was you told everyone that she was 17, and you told everyone else that you were telling her people that so that if she was groomed or preyed on, she could tell you. You were dangling her over the wall.
No, hold on,
predators
stop right there. Don't stop right there. Stop right there.
Stop! Fine, Bowser, you can cry about it, but I have the screenshots, and I can send them to everyone here to show them.
Shut up for a sec!
You could be vaping formaldehyde, which is used in taxidermy.
Oh dear.
What?
Formaldehyde. Oh dear.
What?
I knew it. Oh dear, oh dear.
What? Aren't you an elk?
I don't know what I am.
Financial services industry is complex, it's fragmented. This room is a microcosm of that, I think. So what does the conversation sound like when you're going in there and talking about adopting AI, or really just changing the way you do things?
When we went to go meet with the CEOs of our customers, we heard a very common story. They're all trying to grow their businesses. They're trying to navigate the shifting investor preferences from active to passive and the rise of indexation. They're navigating the opportunity in private markets. They want exposure to new asset classes and types.
And when you get the opportunity to have this conversation, is there sort of an immediate aha moment, or are there sort of institutional sort of hurdles to overcome? What do you hear?
Well, CEOs are cautiously optimistic about AI. They are skeptical of all the AI washing going on in the industry, and I would say financial services in particular wants to adopt this technology responsibly. And that has led us down a path to giving them the ability to speak confidently to their investors and to their regulators about how they're using AI.
Hey, shut up!
Earl explains that the reason he did this was just in case someone tried to groom her in the server, so that she could let him know and he could ban them. But this doesn't really make sense for multiple reasons. For starters, if no one knows her age, how could anyone know they were attempting to court a minor? How is any attempt at flirting or inappropriate conversation worthy of a ban if they can't possibly know their age? And this is also just extremely negligent, using what he believes to be an actual minor as bait to lure in child predators. If Earl truly believed that there were no predators in the server, or even a risk of it, the logical course of action would be to explicitly deny all minors access to the server. But the alternative explanation is quite obvious, leading Cow Wrangler to accuse Earl of being a creep himself, which causes him to have a mental breakdown.
Bowser, you're a predator.
I am no, I am not. Stop it right now. Kick him now. I am not. No.
I can't. They
Whoa, easy, fellas.
For context, Cow Wrangler is referencing a Reddit post that Earl made in which he dreamt that he drank a gallon of milk and turned into a young woman with massive boobs. He also makes it clear that he did not have a wet dream, which is good to know. It was clear that Bowser was being very overwhelmed at this point, but as other panel members stepped in to try and de-escalate the situation, it wasn't long before another meltdown took place.
She looks like a 15-year-old. Her friends look like children. So the fact that you sexualize her and you make comments about dreaming about turning into her is so interesting.
Are you done, please?
I mean, she's just
Bowser. No. I think I don't mean to exacerbate the wounds here.
Attack away. Stop.
What is he gonna be, a villain, or is he's got to be a villain?
Definitely a villain.
Yeah, this is too good.
I see Mr. Bowser so excited he's crying tears of joy.
Bowser, what's up?
Earl also reveals that in a fit of rage shortly after losing his job at the movie theater, he blew up on his best friend Ricky and called him the N-word. And for context, Ricky is black.
I got so mad at him being so apathetic against me losing my job, and when he seemed apathetic to me losing my job, I lost my shit, and I just said, "You're an arrogant N-word."
To put it in simple terms, this stream was a complete disaster, and the only reason Bowser stayed was because he believed he was going to get a percentage of the donations, something he never got. After it was over, Smokey dropped a video on Earl, solidifying his status as a lolcow and attracting a much larger public presence to the story. Unsurprisingly, Earl didn't handle the newfound infamy very well, and he uploaded a now-deleted video to his YouTube channel. In it, he described himself as a caged animal and attempts to separate himself from the lolcow title.
A caged animal acts afraid, acts scared, he panics. A lolcow will just act arrogant. He'll yell, he'll scream. You know, Cyrax, he yells and he screams and he engages with people who accuse him of things. Okay, that's what Cyrax does, and that's what Christian does. They engage with people who want to hurt them. I don't want to engage with anyone who wants to hurt me. Okay, I'm scared right now. I feel as if I am in danger.
While I wouldn't say that Kiwi or Smokey are attempting to hurt him, they definitely aren't in his corner. And yet, Earl has and will continue to engage with them. A week after his video response, Earl appeared on the second episode of the 110 Autism podcast, but this time, there was a twist. In the second episode, they ran a mock trial in which White Bowser was the defendant. Earl seemed to be under the belief that this was a real legal trial and that he was being sued by Smokey for $4.5 million in a defamation suit. This stream also included a cast of characters that were present in the previous episode, including some random guy pretending to be the infamous Chris Chan troll Liquid Chris, who served as Smokey's lawyer. Meanwhile, a random guy named Howard Newman served as Bowser's lawyer, and Kiwi Tapes was the judge.
What we're here to do today is here to tell Bowser, listen, like all this things you've been doing, it all ends tonight, and it ends with you giving me $4.5 million.
Of course, the formal setting didn't really distinguish the content much from the first episode. However, there are some notable gems worth talking about. For starters, when Bowser learns that the age of consent in Michigan is 16, he has a very weird reaction.
Hold on,
Look it up.
Is that actually true?
It is.
There is the link. There is the link. So, Bowser, how do you feel about this revelation?
That the age of consent in Michigan is 16, that really surprises me.
Later on, we also get an appearance from Tony the Black Dragon. Now, Tony is a bit of a lolcow himself, playing a role in panels featuring Cyrax. He's well known for being in a wheelchair, taking pictures of underage girls at a mall, and is supposedly possessed by a black dragon lord who can curse people and summon spirits. He's one of the few people here who manages to make Bowser look pretty normal. According to Smokey, the reason they brought Tony in was to get a certified creep to assess whether or not Earl was also one.
Do you think that the White Bowser's after all that we've talked about, Tony, after all we've discussed?
I don't see
the cartoons that he watches, and if he gets his jolly up on those cartoons, then yes.
But Tony wasn't the only witness to testify in court, as Earl's nemesis, Cow Wrangler, also made an appearance. Earl immediately seemed uncomfortable, saying he wasn't interested in hearing anything they had to say. But unfortunately for him, he didn't have a choice.
Well, you don't like being called out. You like being the big tough male. And quite frankly, Bowser, I know your main fantasy is to have the cute little trad cat wife and a bunch of kids that she pops out every day. You're never gonna get that. You're unlikable. You're unwanted. You're not sexy.
Wow.
You get no money.
I've
And
had
the only job you're able to keep is a broker job because you've lied about your credentials, and I'm really sad about that personally.
Eventually, Earl insults Tony's intelligence, compelling him to turn off the lights in his room, speak in an ancient language, and bestow a curse upon his soul.
I'm so scared.
Usha is Salazar. Kama is Salas. Urlisan is Amas.
Oh my god.
Maunalizal. Mama is Alaman.
Well, Bowser, it was nice knowing you.
By the end of the podcast, the only people left were Kiwi Tapes and Earl. And in the final moments, Kiwi pulled the mask off, revealing that Bowser wouldn't be paid a cent for his appearances.
Bowser, I just want you to know, I do not like you. You are everything that these people call you. And the fact that that you came to me and wanted to start a podcast with me, knowing the kind of shit that I cover, is fucking hilarious. And if you think that you're ever gonna talk to me again, or you're gonna get anything out of me, well, you're gonna be waiting for quite a few Chihuahuas on a Monday. We'll put it like that. I'm never talking to you again. This podcast is never getting another episode. What about payment?
Yeah, and what about payment?
That's it. That was Autism 110.
In the wake of the 110 Autism podcasts, a new show titled Too High for Stupid was born from the ashes. Featuring Kiwi and Smokey, it continues to this day. For Bowser, things only got worse as he finally got his own dedicated thread on Kiwi Farms. It seems as though Earl had reached a breaking point, as he was now more infamous than ever and was desperate to seek revenge on the man who was responsible, Smokey.
I've been traumatized by this entire situation with Smokey McCrack or Smokey MCC on YouTube. This morning I went to the police department and filed a witness statement against Smokey's YouTube channel and against the videos Smokey has made of me. I'm done.
Not only did Earl have intentions of reporting Smokey to the police, he also vowed to report his channel every time he was quote-unquote slandering him. Of course, this was something that couldn't be ignored by Smokey and Kiwi Tapes, as they began reacting to a video of Earl echoing the sentiment on their podcast.
Is Bowser? I think Bowser's finally getting his group of neo to take me down. Listen closely to what he says.
And the more it happens, the more rights I have to report his YouTube channel.
Right there, right? The more whites that he has on his YouTube channel. He's getting all of his Aryan brothers together, and he's gonna take down.
It wouldn't be long before White Bowser himself caught wind of it and joined in on the discussion. At this point, interactions between Earl and the boys began to blend together, with Earl calling them evil, degenerate drug addicts, and the two of them calling him a child predator. However, a notable revelation came when the fake Liquid Chris informed them that Earl was continuing to behave inappropriately.
Las mejores invitaciones se sienten personales y anticipan tus necesidades. El mismo sentimiento que cada Lexus está diseñado para provocar. Obtén ofertas por tiempo limitado en modelos selectos en el Invitation to Lexus Sales.
It's just like a very cool way to prototype extremely quickly. If I go here in Figma, I just have this design here that I pulled together. I can just take the link, I can copy a link to selection, and then I can go into Codex and I can just paste the link. Use the Figma skill to implement the automations page in my app. It was like 90% of the way there.
Bowser has a secret Discord where he streams corn to my... What? That's that Christian troll. What is he talking about, Earl?
I don't know.
This claim in and of itself doesn't seem too far from the truth, because Earl had quite literally admitted to it on his live stream the night prior.
And you know what? I didn't stream to children, you idiot. I did not stream children. I streamed cartoon hentai to children, you idiot.
Under the name of Daddy Butcher, Earl Doobie ran a not-safe-for-work server full of minors. In it, he made announcements of when he would be streaming adult anime, followed directly by, "Get all your homework done, kiddies." In another screenshot, Earl claims that they were all in voice chat watching John Cena assault a 13-year-old, whatever that means. These are in addition to a ton of other gross and disturbing statements that you probably just shouldn't say around people under the age of consent in general. This was, by far, the most clear-cut and egregious evidence against Bowser that had been released up until that point. Although Earl saw fit to dispute how illegal it was in a community post, which read, "I don't know how many times I have to say it. I did not break the law. If I did, the police officers who voluntarily showed up to my door would have said something." And honestly, they said the opposite. They said, "These trolls are idiots." So there you go. Showing hentai in my anime Discord server is not against the law. There is a big difference between hentai anime and real stuff. Notice Earl's choice of words here. He intentionally mischaracterizes his actions and is able to make a true statement without revealing the whole story. Yes, it is legal to stream not safe for work content on Discord, but that's not really what he did. He streamed it directly to children, something he admitted to himself. It's possible that any officers that showed up to his home were lied to as well. Now, Earl did eventually delete the server, but only after this was brought to light, which made a lot of people speculate that he was clearly trying to hide what was going on. He often uses his deletion of the server as a way to vindicate himself, but it obviously doesn't work, as it also later came out that there were images of young Indian children being sent to the server. Not a good look. On the same day as this community post, Smokey uploaded his second installment of Earl's Meet the Lolcows episode. This was likely Earl's breaking point, as 3 days later, he announced a sabbatical from live streaming. People thought maybe he would finally be taking a break from the internet, getting his life in order, and avoiding this entire internet debacle. But they were wrong, as not even a week later, he announced that he planned to begin daily uploads on YouTube.
I'm gonna do daily uploads to this YouTube channel. That's right. I'm gonna start doing daily uploads to this YouTube channel and start acting like a real lolcow. How would you like that much, huh?
It seemed like Earl was trying to take control of his destiny by pretending to be a lolcow instead of actually being one. Like the time he titled one of his live streams, 30-year-old man offers hand in marriage to legal lolly. Of course, it didn't last for long, and Earl continued belly aching about Smokey and his community. This is because everything Earl does is strategic. With every video, he makes a pathetic attempt at getting the metaphorical monkey off his back. And his next stunt would be one where he set out to fully atone for his sins and achieve absolution.
Man, all this talk about white Bowser is making me so tired, and there's snow outside, so I'm cold. Man, I wish I had something to perk me up. Oh, is that Gamer Sups? Gamer Sups is the greatest energy drink in the game. It's got 0 calories, 0 sugar, and it tastes way more delicious than any other energy drink in the freaking game. Here we've got grandma on the 20-year-old.
On the internet. Bless me, O internet, for I have sinned. This is the white Bowser here, and I'm showing up for a confession on the internet. I've dressed up in full church garb, and we're gonna get straight into it.
Your eyes and ears do not deceive you. Earl appropriately and tastefully dressed up as a church pastor and prayed to the internet for forgiveness. As strange as this is, it pales in comparison to the pure cope and consistent logical fallacies that plague his 53-minute-long confessional. Not to mention that Earl carelessly uses the first name of the girl he groped frequently throughout the video. While Earl does admit that what he did was wrong and that he deeply regretted it, he can't help but excuse his behavior and even pat himself on the back. He recalls approaching the young girl's brother and apologizing for what he did to his sister, something that he said took balls to do. He also references his co-workers Nick and Gio, telling him that it wasn't his fault and that it was just an accident. However, when Earl begins describing the groping situation, he describes it as an anime moment.
Now, bear in mind, I was really quite in shock when the whole thing went down. I had never touched a boob before. My hand slipped and touched her chest, that's all I can say. It truly was an anime-esque moment.
This accidental grope is apparently a relatively common trope within anime that typically ends as a comedic, lighthearted blunder with little consequence. While Earl continuously refers to what he did as a sin and shameful, he also almost seems to revel in the experience. He describes the situation as the day his life turned into an anime. Earl wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants people to feel bad about him getting fired, while also gloating about his epic anime moment where he got to feel a boob for the first time. Sick, dude. Congratulations, you freaking won. A common tactic you might have noticed is that White Bowser attempts to excuse his actions not through explanations or apologies, but rather by separating himself from accountability entirely. This includes claiming to barely remember the situation, like he did in the Reddit post, or by claiming he didn't even realize he had groped her. Despite seeking reconciliation for his sins, Bowser seemingly can't help himself, as he gets sidetracked and mentions how the girl's twin sister had larger breasts than her.
The craziest part is that she was kind of a flat chest. She was like no bigger than a B cup. It was actually her twin sister who got the good genes. But we're gonna stop talking like an asshole.
He says that what he did was wrong, that it was a sin, and that he deeply regrets his actions. Then he demonstrates through consistent non sequiturs and side tangents that he actually doesn't really feel bad for what happened. It's obvious Earl doesn't wish to rectify the damage, rather he just wants people to stop calling him a predator. That likely explains why Earl went as far as to write the girl a letter of confession, which he claims could have been used in court to sue him.
I apologize to her. I approached her big brother and he even said life's too short for hate. The one person who really never forgave me though was her twin sister. She stayed quiet. But has a right to be angry at me.
Hey Holmes, find me a 3-bedroom home in Atlanta, near a Whole Foods. Show me the kitchens. Ready to see what you will find with Holmes AI?
Rosemont Market was founded on the premise of a neighborhood grocery store. So a place you can go to for your frequent shop, founded on a commitment to Maine local products, Maine producers. We make a lot of different breads and pastries and prepared foods items, but we also source from hundreds of local producers and farms. I think people inherently appreciate local farms. They appreciate local food. They probably don't always understand how difficult it is for those farms to survive, as well as independent businesses. When you use good quality ingredients and you produce small batch products that are very high quality, it's gonna cost more than something done on an industrial scale. But we believe those are better products. We believe that it's better all the way around for the land, for the people, and for the community.
Think about food. People should really try hard to find the best stuff they can eat. And if you spend your money with the local guys, it's an investment that we're all making in our local communities, which to me is the most important thing there is.
There are so many mass shootings now that it can be difficult to even keep track of them. The sad fact is that these incidents are now so common that you probably won't even give them a second thought 15 seconds after you hear about them. But there's one of these criminals whose identity has been immortalized through memes, even though he himself is likely unaware of it. Patrick Crucius, the El Paso, Texas shooter who killed 23 people in a Walmart. Following the massacre in August of 2019, his face was turned into a Wojak, which has been spread across the internet in thousands of different iterations. Turned into a Wojak, which has been spread across the internet in thousands of different iterations. Today, I'm going to dive into the details of this tragedy and analyze why his face is now considered a permanent fixture of internet culture. Before we get right into Patrick's crime, we must understand who he was in the years leading up to it and who his family was. Patrick Crucius, one of two twins, was born in 1998, hailing from Allen, Texas, an upper-middle-class suburb of Dallas. He also has an older brother, with all of the kids being parented by John and Lori Crucius. Lori had been working as a nurse in Texas since 1990. Meanwhile, Patrick's father, John Brian Crucius, is listed as a licensed counselor and instructor for alcohol education programs for minors. But that's really only scratching the surface of who he truly is. As the most self-documented member of the entire Crucius family, John has a lot of lore. For a lot of his life, he was a typical American dude, managing restaurants like Chili's and Outback while simultaneously pursuing higher education, getting a bachelor's degree in management and a master's in counseling. But coinciding with his counseling degree, his life appeared to take a very different turn around 2005, when he became heavily invested in working with therapeutic institutions. He even opened his own business, which is either titled Energy Immersion Therapy or Infused Being Therapy. Now, the reason I say either is because he himself refers to it by both names, but as far as I can tell, it's just one business. Either way, this business focuses on helping people who are chemically dependent, or in other words, are struggling with drug addiction. He also offers online treatment through the platform BetterHelp, which you may remember for its controversy from October of 2019.
In their own terms of service, they acknowledge that if you are using this site, it is not a complete substitute for face-to-face examination and for a session by a licensed qualified professional. So it's marketed as a cheaper substitute for therapy, when in reality, it's a luxury. It's an addition to therapy.
However, after the controversy, they've made a bit of a comeback, sponsoring a number of different YouTubers and continuing to employ therapists. For the purpose of today's video, the issues that BetterHelp may or may not have is not really that important. But what is important is that the entire life of John Crucius became focused on therapy and addiction treatment. This is because John himself had struggled with substance abuse issues for 3 decades. The Daily Mail wrote an article about this topic where John claims that his addiction went as far back as age 16. He was quoted as saying, "I was always the one daring everyone else to go over the top in the partying category by taking the extreme amounts of whatever we had, whether it was Quaaludes, alcohol, magic mushrooms, or something else." Unfortunately for him, his drug use would eventually manifest in some legal consequences. In 1976, when he was 20 years old, he was arrested and convicted on a drug charge. While it didn't send him in the slammer for too long, he was sentenced to a year of probation. It seems like after this point in time, he did make an honest effort to improve his life. But with that being said, he also admitted that after over 5 years working as a sobriety counselor, he himself continued to relapse. Not only is this circumstance bitterly ironic, a drug counselor who needs drug counseling, but it would also take a toll on those around him. Firstly, it affected his relationship with his first wife and child, who he had left in California, but it also affected his second family, the one that Patrick belonged to. At one point, it got so bad that Patrick's mother made John sleep in a separate area of the family home until he got his shit together. Unfortunately, he did not. Their problems came to a head on Christmas Eve of 2011, when John suddenly got a call from his teenage daughter, Patrick's twin sister, breaking the news that his wife Lori had left for Oklahoma, leaving the kids home alone. John's reaction was to stop by a warehouse store and try to steal a computer hard drive. Now, I can't seem to find any good explanation for why he acted out in this specific way, but I'm gonna assume he was just crashing out following the impending doom of his relationship. John was immediately caught and arrested, spending multiple days in a county jail. It's uncertain if there was a specific substance-related event that caused Patrick's mother to file for divorce in 2011, or if it was just a more general accumulation of problems over time, which led to a separation. But whatever the case is, this incident made John prioritize a few different things. One of them was spiritual healing, and another was recovery from drug abuse. And both of these priorities led him to dive deep into the world of alternative medicine and meditation. He even wrote a book about it, which is where the majority of this information comes from. It was published in 2014 and is available on Amazon to this day, titled Life Enthusiasm: A Path to Purpose Beyond Recovery. Now, the contents of this book detail not only his struggle with addiction from his young adulthood, but also what followed the 2011 incident where he and Lori split up. Basically, the story goes that John is distanced from his family because of his drug problems. As a result, he goes on a spiritual pursuit, and after that point, he had a series of hallucinations and visions during his meditation sessions. And in one of them, he claims to have had a direct conversation with Jesus Christ himself. This is definitely a pretty bizarre detail. Regardless of what effects this journey had on him and his family, within a year of the divorce, John seems to have actually made some improvements, and he was personally treating a musician named Eric Keys for PTSD after he had been the victim of a shooting. However, in that same year, Patrick's father would show that he wasn't quite drug-free yet. In a blog entry he wrote, he claimed that in 2012, he was suffering from lower back pain and pervasive neck pain, with rashes on his legs, severe tooth decay, pain and weakness in his right elbow that physically impaired him, a torn meniscus, which he had neglected doing physical therapy for, and numbness in his feet. All of these recurring health issues led him to take Adderall, Xanax, and Zoloft as methods of coping with the pain. But 2 years later, in 2014, the same year he wrote the blog entry, he claimed to have solved most of these issues and gone off of his meds, thanks to, quote, cranial sacral massage and, quote, energy and sound healing, which, as some of his blog posts detail, included the use of crystals. Even if he was already a devoted therapist for many years at this point and heavily into meditation, this was a very strange addition to his practice. And it's worth noting that he himself says that he started to implement these in his practice thanks to healers that were personally trained by another miracle healer named John of God from Brazil.
I had a group of healers that were trained by John of God in Brazil who came through wanting to rent this space. I rented the space to them and helped them unload their band. We unloaded these large containers with something very heavy in them. I brought them all in and helping him unpack them, and they were crystal bowls. Big deal, because the crystal bowls, as you probably already know, will know very shortly, that changed the whole course of my therapy. I was already a therapist. I was just doing talk therapy. So when I found the crystal balls and had my first experience with them, with those healers, I was completely called to use them and integrate them into therapy.
Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with who John of God is, he's a Brazilian spiritualist who was making a lot of waves in the early 2010s. So many waves that in 2013, he wound up on Oprah.
Are we all, in some sense, missionaries of God? Do we all have the possibility in our own way to be a medium for God?
Todos nós somos médium.
Everybody is a medium who practices good, and we are all children of God.
But it would all fall apart for John of God when, years later, he was accused of raping over 600 women and was eventually sentenced to nearly 500 years in prison. Obviously, this is not to say that John Crucius or these healers trained by John of God were necessarily complicit or even knew about what was happening, but it has been noted by some that this degree of esotericism tends to go hand in hand with a kind of tunnel vision, a state of mind where any issues that aren't related to spiritual practices and beliefs don't receive the appropriate amount of attention. Case in point, if we take a look at John Crucius's blog, which has dozens of posts about how much his spiritual growth has improved his life, it contains 2 posts about his dog, but barely any mention of any of his kids, and no mention at all of how his enlightenment had improved his relationship with them after the 2011 incident. Now, I don't mean to use this to blame John for what eventually happened, because ultimately the person at fault is Patrick. But what I do want to say is that these details about John have obviously led to a lot of conversation about the circumstances that may have negatively incubated the mind of someone like Patrick. According to psychological evaluations of Patrick Crucius in the years following his crime, he was prone to mental illness virtually from birth. As I mentioned previously, Patrick has a twin sister, and while she grew up completely normally, he did not develop nearly as fast as she did, whether it was crawling, walking, or speaking and relating to other people. Ultimately, he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder with the potential for psychotic episodes, which had gone undiscovered for his entire life until after his crime. Now, schizoaffective disorder itself is not schizophrenia. Instead, it combines symptoms of schizophrenia with symptoms of mood disorders. For example, schizophrenia is known to cause hallucinations and delusions, while the mood disorder part would refer to things like mood swings and depression. One incident from his childhood that I've seen mentioned by news articles covering Patrick's earlier life is that he briefly ran away from home in 2014. His parents would call the police letting them know, but ultimately Patrick would return just 30 minutes later. Now, at the time, it was probably seen as a pretty typical instance of a kid acting out. I remember that I told myself I was running away from home once when my mom took away my Xbox, but in Patrick's case, maybe in retrospect, this is an incident that should have been taken more seriously, hindsight being 2020 and all that. It's also worth saying that 2014 is the same year all of his dad's blog posts were made, the same year he published his book, which, from what we know publicly, could have been the peak of John's investment in esoteric spirituality and all of that. But ultimately, it seems like whatever serious developmental issues Patrick had either weren't obvious to his parents, or we just don't have information about what they thought about those issues. Instead, the most we're able to learn about Patrick growing up is from his classmates. We're gonna start with elementary school. At this point in time, Patrick was described as pretty normal, even joining team sports like soccer and basketball. But things began to fall apart soon after his parents' divorce. In 2013, Patrick enrolled in Liberty High School, where his mom was employed as a teacher, although she left her position to go back to being a nurse pretty quickly. A short period after being enrolled at Liberty, he once again had to change schools and started attending Plano High School. Now, this is kind of speculation on my part, but from my own knowledge, constantly changing schools can have a negative effect on any kid's development. This is because it can destroy a kid's sense of permanence. Whatever friend group they had at their old school is now completely gone. They have to make new friends. But in Patrick's case, it seems like he didn't have any friends at all. Once he started attending Plano High School, we start seeing reports of social dysfunction from Patrick. One classmate of his from this time period described him as being frequently bullied by his Hispanic classmates. This person would also comment that the staff looked the other way and didn't do anything about it. Now, it may seem odd that I specifically note that they were Spanish speaking, so I do want to say that I'm not implying they bullied him because they were Hispanic. Unfortunately, sometimes kids are just mean growing up, especially when they haven't experienced enough life to understand how these slights against someone can affect them during early stages of their life. However, as I move forward, you'll see that this specific ethnic detail about his tormentors is something that would become increasingly relevant to Patrick. Also during this time period, he's been described as having an aversion to loud noises, having an interest in snakes, and spending his time playing Halo. Now, this next line is gonna